So let me ask you a question. What do you think is the number one indicator in a person who is successful? What do you think is the number one indicator in a person who is successful? There was a 7th grade teacher who did a study on her 7th grade math students. What she was finding is the highest IQ students were taking her tests and quizzes and weren't getting as high of scores as her lower IQ students. So for people like me, that's a victory. But I don't know if you remember 7th grade math, but 7th grade math is tough. Like you get like decimals and ratios and like parallelograms, which I think is in like a paragraph. Like I don't even remember what that is. But there's a lot of stuff you learn in 7th grade math that's really difficult. And she was finding that the students that had the highest IQ weren't understanding it. They weren't performing well. But the students that didn't necessarily score as high were doing well. So she was like, I need to figure this out. So she tested her students, and she couldn't really find an answer. So she actually stopped teaching. She went to school to become a psychologist, and she was going to figure this out. So the first place she goes to West Point Military Academy, which is a pretty good place to study, you would think, good students. What she wanted to do there is test which cadets at West Point were going to pass and which ones were going to quit. And she was going to see, is there a characteristic outside of IQ that keeps someone going in this school? And as she studied them, she couldn't really find it, and she couldn't really pinpoint it to one, so she went into another place. She went to a very underpaid, very rough neighborhood in the school there. So she went and she studied rookie teachers, first-year teachers in really rough neighborhoods. And she was testing if these teachers were going to last the year, but also which teachers were actually going to take their class from this learning level to this learning level. So which ones were going to survive the year and actually which ones were going to do better. And as she compiled all of her research, she found one common thing between 7th grade math students, Army cadets, and rookie school teachers. And it wasn't necessarily that they were, good looking, or that they had good self-awareness, or that their EQ was great, or they had privilege. It wasn't anything like that. The thing that stood out about them, that was the one common trait, was grit. It was grit. You ever heard of this word grit before? Raise your hand if you've heard this word before. Awesome. Most of you have heard the word. I'm glad. Grit means perseverance towards a goal despite being confronted by significant obstacles and distractions. My definition is you're just stubborn and won't quit. That's what grit is. Grit is having stamina. It's just sticking with it day in, day out, not just for a day or for a week or a month, but for years. So a lot of us with New Year's resolutions are not very gritty. Grit is just going and going and going to try and make your future a reality every single day. If you want to get through it, grit is how you get through it. So let's go back to Acts 2:47. It says, each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Each day. And what happens here in this each day is awesome. God is adding to their number each day, which sounds great. But if you live life and you know your life, you have good days and you also have bad days. And for the church, God was adding to their number every day, but at the same time as their number is being added, they're also being threatened and persecuted and scattered across their known world. Like they were being taken from their homes and made to flee. Like this time period for them was not easy whatsoever, but yet God was adding to their number every single day. So how does the early church, how do we today sit where we are? It's only because of their grit, their perseverance toward a goal despite being thrown obstacles and distractions. Friend, I believe that more than a self-help book, more than another podcast to tell you what to do, more than someone else to come into your life and try to give you incredible spiritual wisdom, what you need more than anything is grit. What you need to fulfill in this life and to be successful in this life is to go after the goal regardless of what comes up, because that's how you get it. The big idea for tonight is this: push through when you want to give up. Push through when you want to get up. So the only way to get our grit is when we understand our goal. The disciples had a goal, which was we are going to add people to our number every day, those who are being saved. Because each of us have one calling. It's to glorify God and to bring people into the kingdom. You got to pick up your baton and you got to keep running. You got to run your race and stay faithful. But how do we do that? What mindset should we have? What practices should we put in place? So if you're with me, go to James chapter 1. We're going to be in the first 4 verses. If you don't know who James is awesome. He's the half-brother of Jesus, and he was the father, or the leader of the church at this time. And so he begins his message to the church that he is leading, scattered all across, with this. So James 1, verse 1. It says, "This letter is from James, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. I am writing to the 12 tribes, Jewish believers scattered abroad. Greetings." I love how I threw that in there. "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. When your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." These are some crazy verses. How could troubles be an opportunity for joy? There's a lot there, but track with me for a little bit. James says troubles are an opportunity for joy. How could that be possible? Well, because our endurance has a chance to grow. Endurance, perseverance, those words equal grit. It's pushing through when you want to give up. But it says when our endurance is fully developed, when grit is fully developed inside of us, you get to be perfect, complete, and needing nothing. Doesn't that sound awesome? Don't you want that for your life, to be perfect and complete and lacking nothing? Like, that's probably what you hope your life would be like. But can we really be perfect and complete and needing nothing in our life today? Do you think you're ever going to get to that point? I don't think so. There has to be something outside of that to bring us this perfection, this completeness, and this needing of nothing. For those of us who believe in God and believe in Jesus, we believe that happens when we finally get to go home to heaven. That's when we are fully made perfect and fully made whole, because we're still on earth today. So grit and endurance, it's really honestly less about getting through our life and getting to something different. Endurance and grit is for us not to just get through it, it's for us to get to it. But what is it? What are we trying to get? It's joy. It's true and eternal joy, only found in the hands of our Father in heaven. But the only way for us to access that joy here on earth is for us to get some sort of a touch, of a grasp of heaven. The only way we get joy today is if we are focused and we are totally in on this goal that is our future. So if you want to be people who you can label yourself on your tombstone as gritty, and I'm not meaning the dance, I'm meaning like you are gritty. You're willing to go through stuff, like you can persevere, you can make it to the next stage of life and all the way to the end, and God says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." If this is the person you want to be, I want to tell you how to get your grit. So the first step of how to get your grit is you have to grasp your future. You have to grasp your future. So the question I have for you is, do you know your future? Where your life is going is headed somewhere. You are living a life that is going somewhere. My question is, do you know where that is? For those of us who confess and believe in Jesus and we have dedicated our life to him, we know and can be secure knowing that our eternity is in the hands of our Father and we are going to heaven. For those of us who have not, there is an eternity separated from God, which is called hell. My job tonight is not to darken the mood or make things weird, but that's just the reality. But if you want your future to be in the hands of your Father, you've got to get a grip and a grasp on your future. So what does that look like? How do you do that? Philippians 3, 12 through 14, the Apostle Paul says something really, really helpful for us. He says, "I don't mean to say that I have already achieved these things or that I have already reached perfection." So going from James chapter 1, James says that you can achieve perfection when you have had your endurance fully developed. Paul is saying that doesn't happen, but I can at least go forward. He says, but I press on to possess that perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed me. No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on, I persevere, I endure to reach the end of the race and to receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. These 3 verses are really what we're going to be unpacking tonight. What does it look like to press on towards perfection and forget the past and reach the end of the race? Paul isn't a perfect guy. We'll never be perfect. You can try to be perfect and you'll fail. That's just not who we're going to be. But even though we aren't perfect, we can try and press on to perfection. Because when we do that, we will be perfect, complete, and needing nothing when we get to the end of our race. The first step in getting to that place is forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. If you want this joy, if you want what Paul has, you have to do what Paul has done. And we've all done things that I think you would agree you would regret. We all have a past. It's part of me. It's part of you. And as we're here on earth, we don't really ever separate from our past. It's like weaved in and through us, and it kind of makes us who we are. So how in the world could we actually separate? How could we forget our past? What Paul is really trying to tell us is don't just forget it. It's part of you. Just don't focus on it. You now have been given something greater than your past. You've been given a greater future. So focus on your future. Get a grasp of it. You need to see it. At the end of this tunnel called life, if you follow Jesus, you will get to be with him forever. That is our future. And what Paul is telling us is just grab a hold of that. Let go of what you used to hold on to and chase and go after this. Doing this practically, I wanted to kind of give you an example. It's a lot like running a relay race and getting a baton and going forward. Except in this race, Jesus is the one giving you a baton, and the race is called life. That baton is our future. That baton is our joy. If you're wondering why your life is void of joy, it's probably because you've either dropped the baton that's been handed to you, Christian, or you aren't running. The second thing we have to do if we want to live a life of grit and you want to get your grit is you have to grasp your future, but second, you have to run your race. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 9. He says, don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. There it is again. It's the third set of verses we've talked about tonight that talk about something greater than what is going on with us today. Our life is our race. The question I want to ask you is, are you running yours? And if you're running, how are you running? Well, let's talk about the first one first. Are you running your race? Whether you believe it or not, God has a plan for you and a calling on your life to do what he's asked you to do, glorify him, and bring people to him. Whether you believe in him or not. He has a plan for you. He has a job for you, and we get to be a part of that. God has called his church and his people to glorify him and bring people to him. That is our number one job. How we each individually do that is very specific to us. So, how do you run your race? You might be a follower of Jesus that just so happens to be a mechanic. You might be a follower of Jesus that just so happens to be a nurse. You might be a follower of Jesus that just so happens to be a student. And the reason I say it that way is because your calling, your purpose, the reason you're on this earth is way less about what you're doing and who you're becoming. Your calling is not about what you're doing. Your identity isn't even wrapped up in what you're doing. your identity and your purpose and your calling is wrapped up in who are you becoming? So who are you becoming? Do you like that person that you are becoming? Because you can easily switch from a person you don't like to a person you do simply by doing what God has asked you to do in any scenario you find yourself in. So are you running your race? The second, if you're running a race, how are you running? What does that look like? And here's my real reason for asking this. We currently live in a world of influencer culture. Young adults, Gen Z, younger people, we are all obsessed with this idea of influence. We want to have influence. This TikTok culture within the last 4 to 5 years, man, the fact that Charli D'Amelio got millions of followers just by doing the same dance over and over is crazy to me. But we're all obsessed, and we're like, I should have started dancing like 5 years ago. Like we wish we would find ourselves in these places of influence. And I don't think it's just personally. I think this has really gotten its way into the Christian life and Christian sector too. I believe the problem with church a few years ago was about prosperity gospel. I think right now the problem is the popularity gospel. We are so obsessed with celebrity Christians right now that I think we are disregarding some really faithful things in our own lives. We think whatever this person that has 500,000 or 1 million followers is absolutely gospel. I think we want to be those people. We want to find ourselves in those circles. We want to have influence, and I think that's great. But it's to what end? If it's not just trying to be popular, I think what we sometimes do with our race and how God has asked us to live our life is to compare it to other people. Like, man, God didn't ask me to, do this. I see my friend, he's got, he's crushing it in his job, and like he's doing all these awesome things, and she finally got a husband, and she's having a kid, and I'm still single. Like, we can't do that. God has called each of us to glorify him specifically. There's one general call for us to glorify him and bring people to him. But he's given you a race, and you're the only one on the track. So it doesn't matter how fast you're going, you're still going to win. He's only called you to run your race. And yeah, you're going to fall sometimes. And you might see other people on another track. For some reason, Hot Wheels just came to my mind, and you're like on a track, and you're the only one though. So it's okay. You can't compare your race to someone else's. And here's one thing I'll say. If you find yourself in that, I just want to be popular, I just want people to like me, God doesn't call us to be famous. He calls us to be faithful. He doesn't call us to be famous. He calls us to be faithful. And if your faithfulness brings you fame, that's awesome. So be it. But if your faithfulness doesn't bring you anything, so be it. Because when we get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of faithful people no one knew about. I personally think those might be God's favorite people. He doesn't play favorites, but if he did. Are you in your race of life so that you might see other people be like, dang, that dude's running real fast and real well? Or are you doing what God has asked you to do simply because he's asked you to do it, hoping that only he gets glory for it? There's simple things about your race. Your race is less about what you do, but it's more about who you're becoming. But your race can be anywhere you go. It is in your job. It is in your relationships. It is with your friends. What are you doing? How are you running it? Are you running a race more for yourself so other people see it? Or are you running a race for him so that when people look at your life, they see him? It's not about the track you're running on. It's not about the speed you're running at. It's not about the clothes you're wearing on the track. It's about getting finally to that end goal and making sure that every step of the way is a step of faith. So you grasp your future. The second is you got to start running your race. The third is invest in every step. Look what Paul continues to say in the next few verses. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. And other translations say I'm not just punching the wind. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. If you're not living out your life on purpose, you could even be doing a good thing for God, and it actually could disqualify you because how you're doing it. He says, I could be preaching to others, but I myself might disqualify myself if I'm not doing it correctly. Now, I don't know if I've told you guys, but I hate running. Like, I hate it. Not a fan. Don't ever want to do it again unless I'm being chased or chasing someone else. Like, I probably will never run again. Because one day at the gym, I had this awesome idea to try and do a cool down run. And if you've ever worked out at the gym for like an hour doing like weight training, and you thought to yourself, maybe I should do a cool down run, don't. It's not fun. But for those of you who do and can actually do it, props to you, because I'm not there yet. But after the gym one day, I was like, I'm going to do a cool down run. My goal is to get half a mile, which isn't, I think, that very hard. But I started running, and I was like 90 seconds in, and I was like, I was tired. Like I was hurting, y'all. I'm just trying to run on this thing, and I look, and I'm like 0.08 miles. It's like awful. Like, I'm not very happy to admit all this, but it was rough. But I kept running. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get to half a mile. I'm going to get there. If it takes me 35 minutes, I'm going to get there. I don't know. I'm just going to keep running. But with every single step I took, I wanted to quit more and more and more and more. My feet started to hurt. I felt like the treadmill was inclining on me. I was like, I don't know if that, or maybe I was getting dizzy. I don't know. But I was just running, and I kept going, and I kept going. But in my head, I was like, I just need to quit. I just need to get off. I need to drink some water. I just need to go. And I'm like fighting my inner body and like my head. And eventually, I just had enough, and I got off. I jumped off. Thankfully, I had gone on a treadmill before. Otherwise, I'd be like that video where I stopped it and I was still going and I like hit the wall behind me. But thankfully, that didn't happen. I just got off. I couldn't do it anymore. And I thought to myself, I was like, I couldn't run half a mile because it was so hard for me. Like, why is that? I was like, I think I just didn't want to push through it. I could have done it. I think any one of us in this room could run half a mile. Probably complaining, but we could probably do it. I think that happens, the reason it happened to me is because there's areas in my life I don't even want to do that in my life. So it's easy to do it on a treadmill. And it's okay for us to do it on a treadmill, because that is justified in our brains. But when you do it in your relationships, if you do that in your marriage, if you do that with your kids eventually, if you can't stick it out now, my fear is that if we don't start with the little things, it grows into big things. Sometimes in life, you just don't feel like continuing to go. You don't feel like you want to take the next step. You don't want to see what is on the other side of this, because life is really hard right now, and you get overwhelmed, and it feels like you can't breathe, and it's so natural for us to be in those positions. But something about God is he never gives us the full treasure map. He just gives us the tools to take the next step. God doesn't give you a metal detector and send you out on a beach to try and find it, to try and find your purpose, or to try and find your calling or find your direction. He doesn't do that. He gives you a treasure map with one dot, with like one line. If you watch Indiana Jones, where it's like all the way through, he gives you like one line. It's like, go here. But the only way you find that is through his word and through prayer. It blows me away when people say, I just don't know what God wants me to do. And I ask, oh, have you asked him? And they're like, no. It's like, you'll probably find it. Go to his word. Go talk to him in prayer. Because when you take that step, you might get to another step that is hard and difficult. This happened multiple times in my life. I moved out here thinking I was taking another job, and now I'm here. There was a lot going on in all of those steps, but I'm glad I took those steps. But sometimes we're on step 4, and we're like cussing him out because this is hard. But when you get to step 10, and you turn around and kind of see it all for what it was back at step 1, that's when gratefulness comes through. But you'll never get to see the other side of something if you don't push through when you want to give up. Each single step of your life is worth it, but only if you invest in it. For you, that might mean your job. It might mean your family. It might mean your money or your school. But really investing in every step that you find yourself in is investing in any season that you find yourself in. Whether you're in school, you're single, you're dating, you're engaged, you're married, you're in your career, you're out of a job, you're trying to find a career. Whatever season you find yourself in, that's the season God has asked you to invest in. An investment is never for the present. It's always for the future. So when you invest in your step, you're not necessarily trying to always make your present better. You're trying to make your future better. And it's hard for us to get that as young adults. But I know a lot of you in this room hope to be married one day, and hope to have kids one day, and hope to see your families blossom. My job as your pastor is not to make sure you're holy and healthy 18 to 25 to 28 to 30-year-olds. My job is to help you attempt and hopefully be holy and healthy 70 and 85-year-olds. It has to start now, though. Developing habits now, investing in now. Because when you do that, you'll be able to look around. You'll be able to turn around and see, wow, this is great. But you're not doing it just for what you can get on earth. You're doing it for what you ultimately get in heaven. It's an eternal prize. You grab the baton and you start running. And we're not always in the steps that we like. Runners all the time hurt themselves. They fall down and they get back up and they keep running. My favorite videos on YouTube is when a hurdler tries to get over the hurdle and it doesn't work. My favorite one is the one where the dude just runs through them all. Like, that's me. I was a linebacker. I get that. But sometimes you find yourself in life and you're like, I hate this step. But it doesn't mean you stop running. Because sometimes the steps you find yourself in, you don't want to be in. Like, to put it in perspective for you, do you think Jesus wanted to carry his cross from the center of the town all the way to the hill? Don't you think that with every step, he wanted to put the cross down, stop his pain, and just run away from it? Don't you think that the Savior of our souls and the one that reigns and king forever, don't you think he wanted to immediately get out of that situation? He absolutely wanted to. He prayed the night before that God would take it away from him. But he persevered. He got his grit. He endured. And he invested in every single step. In Hebrews it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, so that we might be able to be with him. Why? Because he knew that every step. He took a step. He was like, that's for Ethan. She took a step. That's for Chloe. He took a step. That's for Hunter. He took steps in that moment, not really thinking about that moment, but thinking about this one. So when you live your life and run your race, you have to have that same perspective as well. With every step that you take, every season of life that you find yourself in, whether it's good or bad, you have to take the mindset of, I have to think farther than this. Don't just think in days, think in decades. Think in years, think in like full generations of this decision today doesn't just affect me. It affects so much more. So in your life, how do you need to invest in every step? What step are you currently in that you want to get out of? That's probably the one you need to give God the most and trust him with. And if you're finding yourself in a step where you've lost your joy, you might have stopped running. And you might have put the baton down. Because joy is something that's in the future. True and eternal and forever joy is waiting for us in heaven. The only way we grasp a little bit of it today is when that's where our focus is. That's what we're living towards and running towards. As soon as we get off track with that, we stop worrying about ourselves, like we start losing it. I'll do my quiet time in the morning and I'll read with God, and then by 12 p.m., I'm like worrying. I'm like the worst. I'm like, that quiet time didn't even work this morning. Like, do you get me? Like, that's real. Like, why though? Oh, it's because I took my focus off. We're so good at doing that because we're literally toddlers in his eyes. We are so dumb, but he loves us so much. And God's not going to condemn you, Christian, when you mess up or you fall, because in his eyes, you're like a little child. It's okay. He knows you don't know any better, but he does. So just trust him and invest in the steps he's asking you to take, because he sees what's at the final destination. He knows what you're going to get at the final line. So you got to grasp your future. You got to run your race, and you got to invest in every step. The fourth is you got to thank your Father. You got to be thankful for him. Not just trust him. You got to be thankful for him. Because look what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4. He says, we know that God, who raised the Lord Jesus, will also raise us with Jesus and present us to himself with you. All of this is for your benefit. And as God's grace reaches more and more people, there will be great thanksgiving, and God will receive more and more glory. So the absolute essence of our lives is to bring God glory, not ourselves. And it's to bring more people to him. So verse 16, with that in mind, that's our purpose. That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. These two verses that I'm about to read are revolutionary for you if you let them be. They were for me. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone. But the things we cannot see will last forever. Do you guys remember walking with your parents or guardian at Target when you were 5 and that toy you really wanted? Do you remember that? Do you remember that specific toy? No, you don't. You don't remember that. You don't remember that thing you so badly wanted when you were 4 years old for Christmas. You don't remember those things. In 20 years from now, the things that you are so worried and stressed about will not be your worries anymore. Because even though you can see them physically, the things that you cannot see, the God that you cannot see, is more powerful and has more control over the things that you can see than you do. And that's why we should never give up. Because in this life we will have troubles, but take heart, because he's overcome the world. We can have grit. We can push through even though we want to give up, because we are not running our race just for this life on earth. When you got saved, you finally stepped into eternity. You are running for something you cannot see. And friend, if you are discouraged and not joyful, I wonder if it's because you have lost your focus on what you can't see. We don't have to worry about today or tomorrow, because Jesus has already taken it all. And grit is something we can do, but it's not easy. It's not the easiest switch to make in our mind. In my first report in the fall to my college practice for football, I was really excited. I had been training all summer, and I was so stoked to get there. I had a lot of thoughts about what it was going to look like, maybe even opportunities I would have when I got there. College football is a lot different than high school football. It's tough, and it was really hard. A lot of training regiments. We were up at 6 and went to sleep at 10. Went to our rooms at 10. We didn't sleep at 10. There was a lot going on, and it was really, really tough. And I went to a Baptist university, and so my thought was I was going to be surrounded by other guys that believed the same as me. And I come to find out, at a team of 126 other guys, there's really only other 5 dudes who actually love Jesus. And I'm a freshman. I step into this completely new world with guys who believe completely different things. The only thing we eat, sleep, and breathe is football, and it's hard. And after 3 weeks of being the only team on campus through these practices, I had enough. I was done. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I walked into our library on campus, and I walked all the way up the stairs, and I sat literally in the the stairwell on the very top floor, the fourth floor, and I just started crying. It was not what I had hoped for. And I didn't really know what to do, so I did really the only thing I thought of doing, and I called my dad. And I'm just like, Dad, I'm not okay. It's like 11:30 at night. He's asleep. He wakes up at 5 every morning. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just don't know. It's just not what I thought. I thought this is what I wanted. I thought this is what I hoped for. Maybe I should have chosen a different school. I don't know. I just want to quit and I just want to go home. I'm done. My dad paused for a while and he's like, do you remember what I've always told you? He's like, I've always told you, you can do anything for a certain amount of time. As long as you know at some point it ends. He's like, it's just the beginning. You don't know what's going to happen at the end. You just got to keep going. I'm just like, Dad, I just don't know how. He's like, if you quit now, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. He's like, I know it's hard, but you have to finish what you've started. You'll be so glad you stuck it out. When you get to the end of it, you'll look back and you'll be so much better for it. And for some reason, when my dad said those words, I just agreed with him. And I just listened and I did it. I finished the entire season. I had so much fun. Learned things about myself I didn't realize that I had. My dad got me to think about what I was going through and take it and be like, but what could happen if you finish? There's a lot of people who start in their faith, but there's going to be less who finish. We want to be people who finish well, because there is a finish line. My dad knew it because he played college sports. He knew it was hard, but he knew what was on the other side of that line when you're done. Our Heavenly Father knows what is on the other side of that line for us when we run the race of life. He cares about you and me. He knows you deeply. He created you. So the life He's given you, the race He's given you, the step He's asking you to take right now, it's not to throw you off balance. It's to get you to the end. Do you know how much your Father thinks about you and what He thinks about you? Psalm 8, King David says this, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place. The heavens and the earth, the moon and the stars that God has put into place. When I think of those things, David says, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, in verse 4. Human beings that you care for them. What does the creator of the universe owe us at all to give us His care, to give us His love? Nothing. We don't deserve it. We can't earn it. But for some reason, He's given you a purpose and a plan, and He has great thoughts about you. He's mindful of you. You are the apple of His eye. He can't stop thinking about you. He loves you. How crazy is it that the most powerful being, God Himself, is thinking about you, and He wants to take care of you. So friends, I want you to be people of grit. I want you to stick it out. I want you to push through even when you want to get up. But more than that, you could gain everything in this world and put your head down and get it all. But if you run your race in life and don't leave this life with Him, it's worth nothing. We can only run our race and invest in our steps and grab a hold of our future if we know our Father. So my question for you today, do you know our Father? Secondly, does He know you? Maybe what you might need to do tonight You might know your race. You might know what he's called you to do. You might know who he wants you to become. So maybe your question is, God, how can I become more of that? Or maybe you don't know. And your question and your prayer in these last set of songs is, God, how can I honor you with my life? How can I glorify you and bring people to you? Because friends, when you push through and you don't give up, when your focus is more on the next world than this one, that is when you really start to see your life blossom. That is when you start to see your life get joy. And that is when you start to see your life as perfect and complete and needing nothing.